Okay. Welcome to the first meeting of the Harvard Solar Garden 1 LLC. We will publish minutes of this meeting, and it will serve as a documented meeting of the LLC, although I don't anticipate that there will be any actions taken, any decisions made. There are some things that we talked about wanting to do sooner rather than later, but nothing that's urgent to be done now, so I think we can be thinking in terms of the next get-together for any changes to the operating agreement. For an agenda, I prepared a very high-level summary of the cash flow of the LLC through the end of 2016, or the first 2.5 years of operation, and with an estimate for what the cash flow will be for 2017. I've also prepared an analysis from the standpoint of our experience as members, starting with our capital investment, and then updated with what we've received as benefit in terms of net metering credits and what we've received back as cash distributions. We had a group of a subset of the steering committee that was formed almost 3 years ago meet a few times and go through a review of the tasks of managing the LLC, and I'll give you an update of what tasks have been identified and what plans have been laid for accomplishing those, and also for establishing some backup so that we're not dependent on one person to do everything. Right. I then put together a slide highlighting the future outlook. There's a few things that are likely to be different in the future than they have been in the past, and I think we should be mindful of those. And that follows with some near-term actions. The last item on the agenda is a site visit, which I'm going to suggest that we forego. I was there earlier today. I was given a key to the facility when it was first put online, but I can't get in with that key, and I think the lock might have been changed. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because I think about the only thing being there would have versus being here looking at a picture is the opportunity to pick up a few ticks. So, with your forbearance, I think I would suggest that we let that visit go until next time. And if anybody wants, to do so anyway, we can. I'm anticipating we should not take more than a half an hour to get through this. So, but I'm certainly open to questions as we go or at the end. So, diving into the detail. What this schedule conveys is what has actually occurred since the garden went live in the second half of 2014. We went live in June of 2014. The full year of 2015, the full year of 2016, and an estimate of what will happen for the full year of 2017. By way of explanation, the first line, electricity generated, that is the total of net metering credits that have been generated and distributed to our electric bills since the beginning. And those are tied directly to National Grid bills, and they've been spot checked against credits showing up on our respective bills, and I feel very confident that they are an accurate representation of what the net metering output has been. The SREC income likewise is a reflection of actual money received for the years 2015 and 2016, as well as the first part of 2017. As you may know, we get payments about 6 months behind when they are actually earned. So the payments that we've just recently deposited were earned in the fourth quarter of 2016. They were declared at the end of March and paid in May. And the checks that we've just received, I wrote checks totaling almost $50,000, and that was reflective of payments received through Q4 of last year. Parenthetically, I will tell you the picture is not as bright for Garden 2 for two reasons. Number one, Garden 2 started later and therefore came under the SREC 2 program rather than the SREC 1 program, which Garden 1 is in. And so while early payments from the SREC 1 program were many times well above the $400 per megawatt hour level, the payments on SREC 2 have been closer to the floor value of $285. And in fact, right now, we're taking the advice of our aggregator and not taking payments for SREC 2 program right now. We're letting them go into the clearinghouse later this year. So, feel good about that. But it also speaks to the fact, you'll see that the numbers are dramatically higher in 2015 and 2016 than they're estimated for 2017, and that reflects the fact that we're not seeing $400 SRECs anymore. The most recent ones have been in the $300 range. Still, I mean, it's easy to feel bad about that, but on the other hand, you may recall, before we went live, we were actually remodeling at a level of $200 because essentially the bottom had fallen out of the SREC market, and it has since, at least for SREC 1, recovered pretty substantially.
We may see a bump with the SMART program. We don't know. But
I'm sorry?
we may see another bump once the SMART program starts, but we'll see. We'll see.
Bump upward?
Maybe.
Bump, okay,
Maybe.
good. Yeah, that's what Steve has said. That, Steve Kaufman is our aggregator, and he, at the same time as advocating to wait for the clearinghouse on some of the SREC 2 payments, has indicated that we may be seeing a little bit of a bottoming on SREC 1. But it underscores the fact that it's a market-based proposition. So there's other than getting intelligent advice, there's no way to know for sure what the future brings. Eric?
So the lower SREC payments for 2017 are explained by that partially, and also it appears also by lower electricity generation.
Yes, but only a little bit. Our electricity generation has been pretty consistent. Remember, we used a factor of 1,200 kilowatt hours per kilowatt of capacity. And Stephen gave us that early on for this latitude and longitude and historic solarization, i.e. exposure, and we've come very close to that. If you multiply 1,200 by the 294 kilowatts of our garden, you get a number of 352. And we've been plus or minus a handful of kilowatt hours from that value.
think what Eric's trying to say
It's
is that
53.
Why
53
is
is much less than 70 or 69.
Sorry.
that just fair?
Yes. Actually, on the handouts that you have, if you picked it up, there's a little bit of an explanation. Actually, let me grab one too. For the estimate of 2017, I used 15 cents a kilowatt hour as an assumed rate, even though the last 9 months have gone off above 16 cents, and the prior 12 months were over 19 cents. So that's a conservative estimate. And I do that advisedly. We've, I think, always tried to avoid being overly optimistic, because it's a whole lot better to be surprised in a positive way than in a negative way. But that we don't expect the production to be less, but we do expect the net metering benefit to be a little bit less.
But it still makes the same effect on our bills.
That's right, because if the net metering credit rate is going down, then our bill rate is going down.
So it's from our point of view, it's not a big difference.
Good. Good. And similarly, the 104,000 estimate for SREC income for all of 2017, I used the same 352 SRECs as an assumed production amount, but I assumed $300 as the SREC payment amount. The first half of the payments received this year have been at around $320. The biggest significance on this chart is in the comparison between the operating costs and the net metering benefit. So the $53,000, I guess I can't point at the screen and have that have any effect, huh? Okay. The $53,000 of assumed benefit can be compared to the $13,900 of assumed cost for things like insurance, accounting, maintenance, taxes, annual reports, and so forth. The reason that I want to emphasize that is because right now we don't have to think about operating expenses because our SREC income more than covers it. But the SREC's only a 10-year program. And so we're going to stop having income to cover our operating costs when the SREC program runs out. So what happens then? What happens is we'll have to be assessed for the anticipated operating costs, and we'll have to pay those, but doing so in the satisfaction of knowing that the amount we're being assessed is still significantly less than the benefit we're getting in net metering credit. So it's not as nice as simply getting zero bills and not needing to think about it. Now we'll be getting zero bills, but we'll be thinking we have to sort of pay back a portion of that credit to cover the operating costs when the SREC program has ended. What I'm thinking to do, beginning right away for this year, is produce an annual forecast that says, what do we forecast our operating expenses to be? What do we forecast our SREC income to be? So a schedule like this, so that for now, we can be comfortable that that's a $91,000 positive number, and we'll be able to distribute a significant portion of that to ourselves. But when the SREC's no longer there, that dynamic changes. And I expect that to happen in the 8, 9, 10-year time frame. I mean, SRECs are going to continue to come down. There is a floor value, but there's no certain, that's not a guarantee. It's just that if the bid prices go below the floor price, then you have the option of not taking it, going into a clearinghouse auction a year later. But again, there's no guarantee that that clears at the floor price as well. So far, it looks like they will, but future's another thing.
Actually, the guarantee would be if we rally and get a big increase in the RPS legislation through this year, which would probably allow for higher SREC prices in the future. So look out for that. Call and write letters.
Right.
Can you summarize that for the recording, Worth?
Actually, I can't. I'm going to let Eric have the...
Yeah. Well, Senator Eldridge, I believe, has put forth a bill to increase the renewable portfolio standard, which we can send out. We have taken the opportunity periodically to send out updates on legislation that affects members, and this would be a good opportunity to do that. Renewable portfolio standard is what sets the minimum amount of electricity that the utilities can put on the grid from renewable sources, and that was initially established in 2008 with legislation. The Baker administration came in and has let it sit at 5%. No, not 5%. It's around 5%. But many towns are now adopting standards to go above that, and our community choice aggregation program at Harvard is one way to do that. But the other way to do that is to elevate the RPS statewide, and that will increase the floor price because the utilities can't put that amount of electricity on the grid themselves. They need to go out to auction and buy SRECs. So that's how your SREC prices get supported. We can summarize that also in the communication.
Okay.
Hi, sorry, honey.
No problem. Did you pick up a handout?
No,
They're on the table?
Thank you very much.
Libby?
Worth, is my math right in thinking that 13,900 divided by 352 is just under $40 per kilowatt? So would the operating cost be multiplied out by the number of kilowatts we each own? So we have a ballpark idea of what those costs are going to be?
Not 352, 294. 294 is our, pardon?
It's about 48.
Okay.
$48. Right. Now, let's stay on that point though for a minute, because that may not be the only assessment we want to consider. We have another obligation to prepare for, and that is we need to anticipate replacing inverters, some of, all of, not sure, but they have a life expectancy in the 12 to 15-year time frame. That's what we were told at the outset, and we were told to anticipate that kind of a time frame. They have a 10-year warranty, so it's reasonable to think in terms of being prepared to absorb some amount of repair or replacement in that 12 to 15-year time frame. And $60,000 it's a round number, but it's an estimate of what we should be prepared to spend in that time frame. The other thing we have is we have an obligation to fund a decommissioning reserve by year 10. That's an obligation that's written into our lease. And that decommissioning reserve, I believe, is a total of $50,000, so I've just arbitrarily broken it 30 and 20 between Garden 1 and Garden 2. But one way or another, we should be prepared to spend somewhere in the $90,000 time frame, somewhere out around year 10 or beyond. And coincidentally, that's about the same time that SRECs go away. So it seems that it would be prudent for us to, as we're thinking about how much of our SREC income to distribute to ourselves, that we might want to think about holding some of that back and setting up a reserve fund so that when the time comes for those expenses, we'll have money in the bank to cover them. Now again, not looking for a decision about that today, but in terms of my planning, I'm anticipating to take that into account as we think about future SREC distributions and probably turn that into a decision by the LLC in our next meeting.
So it seems like a logical thing to do. Why don't we do it?
Well,
I know you gotta go through the process, but postponing that process doesn't seem like.
it's not a question of postponing it, it's really the
Worth repeat the question for the recording, perhaps?
yeah. So the question is, why not do this now? Why not go ahead and make the decision to hold back $10,000 per year from our SREC income as opposed to fully distributing? And now I'll confess, that's what I'm doing. I mean,
You always said you were going to do that.
I mean, this is as good a time as any. The way we're organized with a manager of the LLC. That's me. Now, I'm not totally comfortable with that. I don't think you should be totally comfortable with that. One of the things we've been doing over the last few months within the steering group is people have been working with me to understand the various things I do, so that if something happened, if I weren't available, we wouldn't be without somebody to step in. And so this kind of decision, which is a decision by the LLC, but at the same time, it's the kind of decision I can make as manager without any kind of a vote. So what I would like is I would like us to be moving in the direction of formalizing some of those policies with a vote of the LLC, but not necessarily feeling the need to do it right now. Now, we're in session. You could stand up and say, I move that we replace work, and that, it wouldn't hurt my feelings.
Ain't gonna happen.
Yeah, sorry.
Wishful thinking.
I had something ready. Ruth, I mean, have I misspoken in what I've said?
Not at
this
all.
point?
And you have, I mean, I want everybody to know, for those who don't know, I'm Ruth Silman, and
Worth,
do I need that? I'm Ruth Silman, and I am not a member of the LLC, but I am counsel to the LLC, so I know most of you, but there are a few of you here who I don't know. And so under the operating agreement, Worth does have quite a bit of leeway as manager, but he's been very, very good and diligent, particularly about checking things with me over the years in terms of, you know, this is what we're thinking or this is what we're going to do. And so, you know, but this is an LLC, it's yours, you are the members. So you haven't misspoken at all, and you're doing a tremendous job.
The comment wasn't meant to be self-serving, but I feel like we need to be open and above board. Yes, Steve.
And I think that as we had discussed in the steering committee meetings, that because this wasn't part of the agenda for this meeting, that we would not make such a decision, but rather think about putting it on the agenda for subsequent meetings, so that the LLC could think about how to vote at the next meeting.
And in the meantime, and I think we can conclude as part of the discussion. In the meantime, as I'm deciding how much to pay out from the SREC income that we have, what I'm doing is I'm anticipating what the expenses are, and I'm also holding in reserve an addition. I'm using the amount of the next year's expenses as an amount not to go below, and that will turn out to be about the amount that we would want to reserve. Carl?
I have two questions. One, how could I see on the spreadsheet that you were holding 10K aside in payments?
Be on the balance sheet.
Well, this is actually the cash balance at the end of the year.
But that's a function of a lot of other things that have happened before. I should be able to see in 2016 that we had SREC income of a certain number decremented by all the expenses, and then the payout should be 10K less than that.
Well, that's basically what you have. You have, the payout wasn't less because we went in with almost that in the balance. So the payout last year was essentially the net between the SREC income and the expenses.
So in 2016, the 10K wasn't held aside?
That's correct.
Because we had it from 2015.
Right.
But presumably one might have held 10K aside in 2015 as well.
This is a prospective conversation, I think.
And then my second question was, can you detail what's in maintenance and communication just for people to know?
It's mostly cutting the grass and maintaining the modem communication between the meters that measure for SREC income and SDA.
And I think one of the things folks should know is that we're not being charged yet by SDA for any sort of technical maintenance.
That's true. That's true. And they have the right to do so. So that's one of the things that I would like, as we go through planning forward years, but I've raised that with Stephen and he said we're okay.
I'll say that.
I mean, this is as good a time as any. We should take a moment. I wish Stephen were here. He couldn't. He's in Vermont this weekend. But we, as much as we're dependent on Ruth for guidance on the legal and organizational side, we've been enormously dependent on Stephen and SDA, and they've done yeoman work. And I mean,
Bless the man.
right. And I mean, I feel a certain obligation to make sure they don't go too far. I mean, plain and simple, but he seems comfortable. Yes.
Worth, would you like to get a sense of the meeting just by a show of hands of whether people like your idea of setting up a sinking fund to take care of those future capital expenditures or not?
I think that's a good idea. How many would agree with that?
Yeah.
How many would oppose it?
Yeah.
Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, in some ways, this is an artificial vote to have the discussion. But because basically I feel the same way, that we have the money now, we should set it aside. But let me just say what the other arguments are so that you know what they are. One is, some of you aren't going to be around in 10 years. And so you're setting aside money that you could be spending, using today for a benefit that you will never receive, that your heirs or the next person that buys your shares will have. And so it will, possibly you can recoup that by trying to get it back in the price you charge for selling your shares, but possibly not. So that's one argument. The other one is one that Marty and I, back there, hi there, Marty, have lived through, which is that you're making an assumption that the money that's set aside will in fact be there when we need it. And Marty and I are the owners of a condominium, or the joint members of a condominium association in New Hampshire, where the managers ran off with a whole pile of our money, along with 20 odd other associations' monies. So, you know, I trust Worth, and I hope we can trust the next manager, but just understand that, you know, stuff happens in the real world. And so there is some argument to be made to say, you know, the $1,000 or $1,500 or whatever we each owe, we might be better off sending a check, you know, when it's needed rather than putting it aside. So I just, you know, there are arguments on either side, and I just wanted to share some of them. Carl?
I think the only argument I'd make for doing it now is because we are really struggling to have people besides Worth pitching on this. And we're not going to necessarily have very many people that are interested in going around and collecting money from folks. I know from much smaller endeavors in the soccer club, there's a lot of people that don't always pay up when you want them to. And chasing folks around isn't much fun. And if we're short on manpower right now, Worth is our only real resource. And I sure don't want Worth chasing people around for money, much less whoever else volunteers. So I think we should do it while we have the cash flow available.
Yeah, one thing I was thinking is if you do go to sell it, if you're going to owe all this money, it may make it, you know what I mean, each year, it may make it less saleable in the future. So it would seem to me it would make sense to have a sinking fund or hold some money back, and then people wouldn't be looking at, you know, maybe not owing as much as they're bringing in type of thing.
Right. Let me just throw one more consideration into the mix. As we were able to do for construction, we do always have let's say we got to year 10, and let's say we hadn't accumulated a reserve, or let's say the reserve was insufficient to cover whatever came up. Besides the option of assessing ourselves to cover the cost, we would have the option of borrowing to cover the cost and creating a payback obligation. So, and I'm reasonably confident that funds can be made available on that basis if we got to that point. So, I'm just saying, I don't think it's not a do or die kind of a decision as much as it's mostly a timing decision.
But I think that borrowing money it just puts off the problem. You still have to collect it from folks.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. But, well, yes. I'm going to suggest we move on. I think we've had a good discussion, and we're not going to make a decision now anyway.
But you have the sense of the meeting.
Yes, and I appreciate that. The next schedule is something we haven't looked at previously, and that's looking, and actually I suppose, well, no, I won't do that. I wanted to look at our respective investments from an investment and payback perspective. And to do that, I simply set down our original contributions. That $1,022,560 is the sum of all of the capital payments that we made collectively back in 2012 through 2014. The next line is from the same schedule we were just looking at, what we've received as net metering credits. And the third line is what we've received in cash distributions. And then the last two lines are simply the cumulative effect of those benefits and distributions and a percentage reflection of the original investment. And I don't know about you, but I was a little surprised that by the end of this year, we will have, or by the end of last year, we had recovered almost 32% of our original investment, and by the end of 2017, and that's actually a conservative number on the net metering credit, that we're at almost 44%. Libby?
I've been doing this at home. As of the last National Grid bill, I'm at 36.97% payback.
Okay. So that's
consistent.
between here
Yep.
and here.
Yeah.
And not everyone is going to have the same result because different people had different investment levels depending on when they came in.
Right.
Because the ComSolar 2 grants were higher in the earlier days than they were in the later days. So the actual...
And it's also a function of the number of kilowatts, because the only a small part of the number, up to 5 kilowatts, was covered by
Correct.
the benefit.
Correct. So in fact, everybody's specific number is going to be different, you know, plus or minus a little bit, just because of the difference of investment.
Yeah, is that taking into expenses worth or not?
No, that's simply your cash in and your cash back, I mean, your benefit back.
Well, and also what we have not paid for an electric bill. So,
Well, that's what this is.
That's
That's the net metering.
Yes.
That's the net metering bill.
I think it does take expenses into account because the SREC you have is less expensive. It's not the original payment, it's the net payment.
But again, it's what you've received back.
More than we modeled.
But
Wait.
the question was, does it take expenses into account? And I think the answer is yes.
But it's a cash-to-cash kind of analysis. And the thing of it is, I remember a meeting we had in Volunteers Hall where the question on the table was, should we back out? And the reason was, with the drop in SREC levels, what we had originally looked at as maybe a 6 or 7 or 8 year payback was now looking like a 12 to 15 year payback. So this is the reality.
yeah.
Because these are not based on speculation, they're based on what has actually happened. So, like I say, I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel pretty good about it. Okay, the next part, and what I did a few months ago, and what a group of us have done since then, is go through the task list, the things that have to be done day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year, to keep everything moving forward. And so this the second page of your handout itemizes what those things are. And I don't know that we need to go through them individually, other than to say what a few people have agreed to do, Sydney and help me out. Paul and Sue Toll have spent time with me, going through the checkbook, going through the forms we fill out. Sydney helped me put together the check payments that we made recently. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get help with each of the actions that are involved, so that by this time next year, I can say, look, if I'm not around, things will continue because somebody else knows how to do it. So I don't think we need to go through all of these, other than to note that everything that needs to be done has been done. I guess I will comment on this one item right here, the 1603 reporting, because this is critically important. You may recall, we got payments from the government that for Garden 1 were over 400,000, for Garden 2 were over 300,000, And those were cash payments shortly after we went live in lieu of our being able to, or having to take the 30% investment tax credit. And in my mind, this is what made this project possible. I mean, Ruth's help and Stephen's help, all critical, but if we hadn't had the 1603 program, we wouldn't have been able to do this. Because we would have all had to make our payments at the gross level and then file our tax returns for that 30% tax credit, but instead we were able to just take the 30% off the top. Not quite, but I mean, it got hooked up in the, what do they call it, the sequester.
We got hooked, yeah, we got
So
held
we
up
lost
and
a
then
few-
we lost a few percentage points.
We lost a few percentage points
But in
there.
the main.
But in the
not-
main, we got what we bargained for. What I have to do, what we have to do every year is file a report. And that report doesn't say a lot. It says ownership hasn't changed, or if it has changed, all of the owners are still tax-paying entities. One of the conditions for getting the grant was everybody in the project had to be a taxpayer because it was in lieu of the tax credit. So if there was even 1 kilowatt owned by a nonprofit, for example, and it wouldn't just take away the 1 kilowatt worth of grant, it would take away everything. And for 5 years, they can come back and take it back. Now, not all of it, it does earn it, but like we're at year 3 now, and we're vulnerable to, I think, a 40% recapture. So, we make sure we do that.
Yes.
And the status is that it was done last year in June for Garden 1, in January for Garden 2. I'm expecting the email on June 15th or 16th for this year, and believe me, it will be the top priority. It's not hard. It just says ownership hasn't changed. It also says that production has been according to what we expected. So we do go back, we give them a spreadsheet with all the details of the production, and we compare it to the original budget. So it's one of those things. It's not a lot of work, but it's critically important. The other things, tax returns, Massachusetts annual reports, all important, they're all up to date. We've been very well served by the accounting firm of Stowe and Degon. They were recommended by Stephen from a prior relationship, and they've done a very nice job for us on our tax return.
Where are they?
They're in Westboro, I think, or they're on Route 9, just west of 495. And then insurance is the next big item. We estimated what the premiums were going to be in the coming year. I originally estimated $3,800 for liability, and I just paid $3,847. So we're pretty much on track as far as controlling our insurance. By the way, insurance it's another thing that's turned out better than we expected. We were looking at an estimate of $12,000 for insurance for Garden 1 and Garden 2 at the outset, and it's come in around 8 for the combined. We're using Murphy Insurance, and they're using Acadia as the carrier, and again, doing a good job. I know Ruth's got to leave.
I have 2 minutes. Does anybody have any, legally related questions about the operating agreement or anything?
No, but thank you.
Thanks.
My pleasure.
Thank you for being our legal counsel.
That's my pleasure, but, just so you know, I get questions all the time about So people call me, oh, we want to do what you did in Harvard. And I say, well, okay, but we had 1603, and they go, I know, we can't make it, the balance sheet work as well. But people do want to do it, so, it's still the model.
And it's happening though.
It is, it's happening differently.
Yes.
But it will happen, we'll bring this model back again, when things calm down with National Grid and other utilities. Okay, but thank you all.
Thanks, Ruth.
Keep the sun shining.
Okay, so the last couple of items, I think I had a communication with everybody a year or two ago about spreadsheets that were available in a Dropbox where you could monitor your individual account. They are there. I had one query today about them. They don't include the investment analysis, but that's easy to add. So if anybody wants to get back into their investment spreadsheet, or their analysis spreadsheet, just let me know and I'll make sure you have a current share from that Dropbox to access it.
How often do you have to get work?
Well, it gets updated as often as the things that change. Every month I get the National Grid credit data and I plug it into at least one of them. It's the same in all of them. And I've not been trying to keep them current. What I would do is if you wanted to access yours, I would update it, just by copying it from mine to yours.
So it's an as-needed basis?
As needed and as requested. When we talked through it within the steering committee, the sense was not a big deal. It wasn't that interesting or valuable. So I think it's just a question of, if you want it, let me know and I'll make sure you have current access.
Maybe once a year would be good for everybody to see how they did that year.
Right. Well, and a lot of people are doing it themselves in a different way.
Yeah.
So it's redundant to that.
Yeah.
And the last item is the website. Carl's maintained the website since forever. We just extended it a year, reimbursed Carl for his costs in doing it, the hosting fees, and it's still kind of up in the air. Do we continue it? Who maintains it? What does it contain? As Ruth said, most of the queries that we get from the website are either people wanting to know if they can still get in, and people wanting to know if they can have our forms so they can do it themselves. And the answer to that is hell no. Not because we would be unwilling to share it, but because certain things have changed so much that they would be irrelevant. They'd be going down a blind alley.
I just had a question when you were talking about 1603.
Mm-hmm.
Is it correct that after 5 years, a nonprofit could be a shareholder,
Yes.
including a municipality?
Yes. There's the constraint on non-tax entity ownership lapses after 5 years. Yeah.
Am I correct in saying that when we first set up the bank accounts, that it was with Enterprise and there were 4 co-signers? And when it got moved to North Middlesex, there's now only 1 co-signer?
That is true, and North Middlesex has just gone through a merger, and so we're now Main Street Bank, and that's one of my very short-term action items, is to get to the bank with at least a couple of other people to get more people on the account. So, quick run through future outlook. We've already talked about most of these things. By year 10, and possibly before, operating expenses will exceed SREC income, and it will be necessary to assess members to cover operating the difference. Even when there is no income, net metering credits for members should be significantly more than the necessary assessments. You go back those numbers, 53,000 as net metering credits, 13,000 for expenses, even if we add 10,000 for reserve, we're still looking at least a 2-to-1 relationship of benefit to expenses. So I don't foresee a situation where we would be needing to assess more than what people would be receiving as benefit. Even though anything less, more than 0 is an adjustment that you have to take some getting used to. And by then, in net metering credits and cash distributions, we should all have recovered most, if not all, of our original investment and still be able to look forward to continued positive return even when assessed to cover operating expenses. I mean, I think that's really my summation of this report. We're doing great so far. We've been, SRECs cover a multitude of sins, and we were able to use them early on to pay back the short-term borrowings that we made to cover to cover development costs that weren't covered by the original investment. And going forward, they're going to nicely cover our expenses for the next several years, and they're going to let us reserve for the major replacement expenses that we face.
Does it make sense to briefly outline, if you were in the unfortunate circumstance where you were assessing folks and you had a person who wasn't paying, what the steps would be to try to address that situation?
Well, I think that, let me take that as something to think about and maybe write as a follow-up, as opposed to trying to doing it on the fly.
Well, the only real mechanism we have is to take away their electricity credits, right?
Yes.
So just so people know that that's what essentially the LLC would be going through. If you had a particular member that wasn't contributing to their assessments, the only real mechanism to try to gain compliance is to remove their credits from their bill.
And in a nutshell, that's what the operating agreement says now. Because there is a provision in the operating agreement that we all sign that if we default on any obligation, that we essentially give up our rights to the net metering credits. Now, we have the challenge of transferring those credits somewhere else so they could be monetized. But believe me, that would not be a problem. The number of you that have said to me, I would take more if it was available. I think very, very likely we'd be able to redistribute a defaulting share, that's what that would be, within the existing membership. But I think the other point is I would anticipate also having, if it was a short-term situation that could be solved with a loan to be paid back in a short amount of time, that would also be, I think, easily done. So I don't think it's just a one-size-fits-all answer. I think it would be according to the circumstances.
I thought it was useful to have everyone understand what the only mechanism is that the LLC has at its disposal.
Okay. No, I agree. Chuck?
Worth, just something we might have to think about in 2024. The net metering credits are coming from National Grid. Can you monetize them? I mean, as I understand it, they will give you electricity, but I don't think National Grid will ever give you money for them.
No. By monetize, I mean have someone else take them as a credit on their bill.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
And then that person would pay the assessment in that the defaulting member had not paid.
Right.
Right. No, you're right.
Yeah.
There's no alternative to having that credit be distributed through the Schedule Z to some
Right.
number of electric accounts.
So unfortunately, in some sense, to mow the lawn, we can't just grab a percentage of credits. We're all going to have to, have a cash payment or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Right. Yeah, and right. And that's really what I want to start, because it's
We gotta think
it's
about
not
how
going to
we're
be an
gonna-
issue for several years,
Yeah.
but it's inevitable that it will be.
Yeah,
We
mechanism
have
to
be
put together.
prepared.
We've been remarkably stable in terms of membership, even though there have been a couple of potential change-outs of people. So we haven't yet had the opportunity to go through what happens if somebody moves and needs to sell their shares. And so that may be a future discussion for the steering committee, or to say, are there any guidelines for this? Or perhaps the membership says, hey, you're on your own for coming up with a financial model for that. We don't have any pro forma for that, but you can make some reasonable guesses as to how that might happen. But so far, it hasn't come to pass.
Yeah, it's actually the next slide.
Oh, okay.
And
Sorry.
Well, if we'd gotten finished before Ruth had to leave, one of the things I've asked Ruth to do is to look at our operating agreement and our membership subscription agreements and come up with a transfer documentation. Because we need documentation that essentially establishes what are the obligations of the assuming member and what are the obligations of the selling member, if you will. Because ultimately, if one of us says, I want to sell these shares and I want to sell them to this person who's buying my house, for example, we want to facilitate that, but we want to make sure that the person receiving that ownership also understands their obligations.
Right.
And that's the last slide. We need to have in place procedures for ownership transfer. And one of the considerations, do we want, for example, to have a principle of first refusal by existing members? Now, obviously, if any one of us wants to sell and they want to sell to the person buying their house, as an example, we don't want to interfere with that. I mean, first and foremost, it's yours, and if you want to sell it to your new one, that has to be okay. Now, we have to go through an acceptance process, because don't forget, these are securities. And so just as we all had to establish our eligibility for that ownership, we have to make sure that a new person coming in is likewise qualified. But it should be a formality. And are there any other considerations? Is there anything else we want to think about as far as, to me, it's the bigger question is, so what happens in an involuntary, a default, and or what happens in a situation where someone wants to liquidate but hasn't identified who's to receive it? Do we want to have a waiting list among ourselves? And if it goes that route, at what price does the transfer occur? Do we have an auction? So there's a bunch of things to think about.
Just thought of another thing. So let's say I sell my house and I've given a description of what I think the value proposition is to my buyer, but I've left off the decommissioning reserve and the inverters. And the person takes it on, and all of a sudden they get the surprise email from Worth that says, by the way, there's another $90,000 involved. Does the LLC have a responsibility to make sure that there's full disclosure to the new member?
Well, that's what this is about.
That's the first line there.
In the documentation that would need to be executed by you and the acquiring member would be that kind of disclosure. So it would be acknowledged within the transaction.
I don't know if it's worth even bringing it up, but if a member finds that they have too many kilowatts because their electric bill is becoming more and more negative month by month, the member wants to shed a portion of his or her kilowatts. That could be done if there are other people in the group that could use more, but a mechanism has to be developed to do that.
Yes,
And that would be the same mechanism.
right.
Yeah.
That's a variation of what this is about, yeah.
I mean, I could see that happening.
I can too. I mean, in fact, I know of a situation where it exists, but happily, it's within a family. They have two different ownership entities, one that has too much and one that has too little. So it'll be a,
What's the
Okay,
downside
but-
of having an extra credit back? What's the?
You can't monetize it.
we were told
Yeah.
that National Grid has the option. If you build up a negative for so many months in a row, they can come back and say, you're not generating it for your own use, you're now a producer, so we are going to monetize it, but we're going to do so at wholesale rates.
Do we know what those trigger points are?
No.
Okay, so
It was
I was
anticipated
about-
annually.
I was about to ask this question when Stephen put up his hand. I've had a little conference here with somebody who also owns 5 kilowatts. I'm running a negative balance on my energy bill of $900. And I can't monetize that. So I wonder if it would be useful to have a small survey across the membership to see who has too much
What is too little?
and who has too little. But I don't want to get the next bill and have that reset down to $100, right?
But it's not clear to me that you could transfer a credit. You might be able to transfer a portion of your ongoing generation.
Right.
Right.
But you can start eating into it.
Yeah, and then you can do what you have.
It was
Right, I should just buy an
anticipated to be-
electric car, right?
It was anticipated to be, if you carry it for more than a year, then they have the option. I don't know that it's ever been done, but it would be worth finding out.
And I only heard it anecdotally. I've never seen anything in writing that's
It
documented.
sort of seems like the sort of thing that it would be nice if only 1 or 2 people had to research this, rather than every single household had to research. Well, okay, half the households that are running the negative balances.
I have to communicate with the town about this because of the CCA program, so I will take responsibility.
Cool, thanks.
But I'm another one that has been over $1,000 on that side for over a year now.
Right. Well, I think the idea of a survey to just get a sense of
Yeah, good idea.
how many people in both directions there might be.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Right.
So I will
Can
include
one only
that.
sell in thousands?
Sorry?
I can only sell 1 kilowatt?
Yes. Yes. Well,
Maybe I should just have someone park their electric car.
I was going
in
to
my
say,
house.
I'll bring my car over and pay you. Yeah,
For a
Yeah.
price, yeah.
that'll work.
I mean, there's nothing technically that would prevent us from, because it's all in terms of percent of the whole,
Yeah.
but we used the kilowatt. In fact, we used, I think we originally said no fewer than 3. A few people asked for exception and we gave it. So we have a 2 kilowatt member. We have a 1 kilowatt member in Garden 2, but that was somebody that had 5 in Garden 1 and wanted more.
Right.
But in general, the small 3 kilowatts is the smallest share that we have, with a couple of exceptions. Okay, any other questions or comments before we wrap up?
So I had some questions. I missed the beginning where you talked about this, but can you just give the outlay of where SRX are heading, and why they're lower, and what the balance file is, and what you...
Why don't we do that afterward, because you're right.
You do cover that, sorry.
We did
I was thinking
talk.
of this building, this room, and the other building in the church, so I got here late.
Okay. Anything else?
Thank you, Ward.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Bert.
thanks so much.